Let's talk about indefinite pronouns. Now, this is quite a large category of pronouns, as you can see, although some of them overlap a bit with each other. So if you look at another, anybody, anyone, anything, they all start with any, and that way you can definitely narrow them down quite a bit. Now, what indefinite pronouns do is they refer back to a noun in the vaguest way possible. So they have a very kind of vague reference point. Okay, they don't refer to any specific person, place, quantity, or thing. So no specific, there we go, no specific person, thing, etc. And you can see that from these. So if you were to say no one, what does that actually refer to? Well, it refers to an absence of something, I suppose. So one way to think about these then is that these are indefinite. They're not quite as specific, but some are more specific than others. So for instance, if you say, let's see here, either would have to be one of two options typically. So you'll see that some are more specific than others, but this general description is definitely apt, that on the whole they are fairly indefinite. Another way in which we can kind of categorize them is to split them up a bit. So some of these refer to universal categories. So universal category is a very large category that encompasses everything, quite literally, right? Or everybody, all the different people. But others refer to an absence of things. So these are negative indefinite pronouns. And we have ones like that as well. We have no one, as mentioned. We have nothing. We have none. And we have a number of different ways then to split up these pronouns. We can see that from these examples here as well. So if we want to split up the pronouns in a different way again, we can look at these indefinite pronouns as referring to nouns in different ways. So if you look at the first example here, everybody, everybody doesn't refer to any particular noun close to it. But if we look at many, many would have to refer probably to some kind of previous noun that we just had. So this could be people, let's say, could be my friends, but presumably there has to be some kind of reference point just before we get to this sentence. Otherwise, it's very difficult to know what many refers to. Everybody, on the other hand, doesn't seem to have really any reference point, any noun that it refers back to, because, well, it's everybody. It's all the people in the world, let's say. Okay, so it doesn't need that reference. And then the last one here, all, this one refers slightly forward. So it refers to the bullies, the noun that comes afterwards. And notice how it's functioning differently as well. It's actually functioning like an adjective. So sometimes you'll see indefinite pronouns taking on the job of other parts of speech. And one common way in which they do that is as an adjective. So what kind of bullies? Well, all bullies. And now you can see how we can classify these indefinite pronouns as doing a number of different things in terms of how they relate back or forwards to different nouns. There's a lot that we can say about indefinite pronouns, and we don't have time to cover them in depth here, but I think one thing we can focus on is the issue of agreement. And if you were to go back to the beginning of the video and just look at the chart again, you'll see that a lot of these pronouns are either singular or they are plural in form, and then some are singular or plural. So that gets a little bit confusing, and I just want to shed some light on what that means in terms of what we call agreement. So agreement is the relationship between the pronoun and the verb that comes later, and often we have to figure out which one agrees in terms of number and person with the earlier pronoun. So if you look at this example, each is pretty much always a singular pronoun, and that means that it has to take a singular verb. So we would pick was. And this can be confusing because from the context, we know that this is actually referring to multiple people, right? Each of the Olympic athletes' coaches is plural. And so we might think, well, there are multiple coaches, we maybe need were, which is the plural verb. But don't let that confuse you. Most of the time, each remains singular. Some of the other pronouns are a bit more ambiguous. If you look, for instance, at none, none can be singular or plural depending on the context. Some grammarians are going to be sticklers about this. They will insist that none refers to no one, and one is singular, and that's why it should be none of the horses smokes, not one smokes cigars. But there are multiple horses, and I think most of us would say, well, we're talking about all of these horses, so smoke should be the correct verb. And there's no easy answer to this. It depends on how strict you want your rules of grammar to be, but just be aware of that some of these pronouns, they are singular or plural depending on context, and you really have to look at the context to see which one is meant. Tricky ones include everyone and everybody, so everybody. And if you look at these closely, you'll see that body and one, these refer to singular things, right? One body. Now we're referring to every single body, but we're kind of implying that there's just one body we're talking about. Same thing with one, right? Every single one, you might say. So in that case, if you insist on this being one and body, you would say every single one should have a donor card in his or her wallet, right? We do want to be sensitive to gender in this case, so we would pick his or her. And it makes sense then that we have his or her because his or her is singular and one is singular as well. But the truth is that some of these pronouns, which in the chart earlier you'll only see in the singular category, are starting to shift somewhat, and there is becoming more common. So this is often called singular they, which is of course typically inappropriate, but you're going to start seeing this more and more, that people just resort to saying there because they know that in general, everyone does refer to multiple people. It's just that grammatically it does not. So to summarize then, what we've seen is that agreement can be tricky with indefinite pronouns. Some of these pronouns are clearly in the singular category, some are in the plural category, some are in both, and then some, like everyone and everybody, are in the singular category, but usage is starting to shift, and just watch out for that because singular they, is becoming more common. I would suggest that in an academic context, you would still stick to his or her as much as possible. This would be better because it's just a little bit more formal and it follows the traditional rules of grammar.